America, I feel really bad for Jason Arday, the now dead Cambridge professor, and not for the obvious reasons. Nobody who gets hired as a DEI hire knows they're a DEI hire. Nobody, not one. Sit there and try to think of a single time you have ever heard of that happening. Nobody sits across a conference table and says, "Congratulations, welcome aboard. And for the record, you finished 11th and we moved you up to 4th. Nobody sends that letter. That letter has never existed. There is a number. Somewhere in that building, there is a number. How far your file moved and exactly why. Somebody worked it out. Somebody wrote it down. It is sitting in a folder with your name on it. They know it. You never will. And you can't go ask. Go try it. Walk into HR Monday morning, sit down and say, "Hey, quick question. Was there a thumb on the scale for me?" Watch that room. Watch the face. You will not get an answer. You will absolutely get a reputation. So now you're carrying a question you're not allowed to ask about a number you're never allowed to see in a job you're not entirely sure you would have gotten. Folks, that is not a favor. You can't agree to a deal when you're the only person in the room who hasn't read it. And I know that because I'm one of them. On paper, I guess I'm a minority. I know, look at me. I've got property, a goat, and I yell at the camera for a living, but there is a box on a form. My name goes in that box, and that box makes somebody's numbers go up. I have made numbers go up that nobody ever told me I was making go up. Everybody in this fight is arguing about the guy who got passed over. Nobody in 3 solid weeks of wall-to-wall coverage has said one word about what happens to the other ones. Now, before anybody mistakes this for sympathy, let's clear something up. I laughed at the book and the lies and the impossibilities right along with everybody else. I'm not going to stand here and apologize for it. You put yourself in public. You publish it. You put a price on it and ask strangers to buy it. Everybody gets to laugh. That's not cruelty. That's the deal, and it's always been the deal. I do that on this show almost every night. I get it right back every night from people who have never met me, and honestly, about half of it's fair. The laughing was never my problem. Then he was dead, 41 years old, found in a flat in South London 9 days after he resigned. And inside about 6 hours, both countries had picked a side and started handing out blame. My side? He did it to himself. Fraud, grifter, diversity hire, live by the lie, die by the lie, told you so. Their side? A racist press hunted a black academic until there was nothing left of him. And every single one of them is certain they know why that man is dead. But nobody knows why that man is dead. No finding, no inquest result. The police have said unexpected and not suspicious, and that is the entire public record on this earth. So all that certainty on all sides showed up before the coroner did. That's not analysis. That's a room that was already having an argument and a dead man walked in, and they picked him up and started swinging him at each other. I'm not doing that tonight. I'm going to tell you what built the room that killed Jason Arday. Here's something you can check yourself right now. On your phone, while I'm still talking if I'm boring you, go read the press release. See, when an institution hires somebody, they put out an announcement. And in that announcement, they tell you which of the 2 jobs they actually hired for every time. It's not hidden. It's not leaked. It's not a document someone had to steal. They publish it proudly. Read what they lead with. If they lead with what the person did, the finding, the record, the thing they built, that person has one job, and it's a job you can finish. Oh, but if they lead with the first, or youngest, or only, or diverse, congratulations. You're reading a job description for a job that nobody is ever going to say out loud to the person it belongs to. Cambridge, 800 years old. They gave us Newton, Darwin, the structure of DNA came out of that town. Their announcement led with youngest black professor in the university's history. Not a paper, not a finding, and not one sentence about sociology. He was hired as a sociology professor. See, that's not a hire. That's a press release with a person attached to it. That document is doing 2 things at once. It's how they assign the second job. And it's the only copy anybody ever writes down. Because they never send one to him. I'm Chad Law, the last gay conservative, and America, this is common sense. Text me, 252-CHAD-LAW. Questions, arguments, tell me I've got it wrong. I'll get to you in the after hours after the broadcast. Now, let's take this whole thing apart. So if this were one liar at one university, that's a story. Bad week for Cambridge, everybody moves on, we do a different show tonight. It is not one university, and it is definitely not one guy. Let's go read some more press releases. And I want you counting two things while I do this. Count how they announce the hire, then count how they announce the exit. Harvard, August 2020, they announced their first Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, Sherry Ann Charleston. Read the word first again, and that's the whole announcement. The job doesn't exist, and now it does, and she's the face of it. January 2024, an anonymous complaint lands at Harvard with 40 allegations of plagiarism, most of them in her doctoral dissertation. And a chunk of what she's accused of lifting belongs to her own husband. That is a hell of a Thanksgiving, let me tell you. Now here's the part that matters, and watch it, because you're going to see this exact move 4 more times tonight. Harvard's first public response was to praise her work. Somebody hands you 40 allegations about your diversity chief's dissertation, and the institution's opening statement is a compliment. Not will look, not that serious, a compliment. Her husband ran the same operation at Wisconsin. Laver Charleston, Deputy Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Inclusion. He'd published a paper listing his wife as a co-author that tracked awfully close to a paper he'd already published by himself. Duplicate publication, gift authorship. Wisconsin removed him in January of 2025 and sent him back to teaching at a 60% pay cut. And they made a point of saying it wasn't for the plagiarism. Of course not. It never is. Columbia's DEI officer, Arday McKen. Allegations surface, and a few months later, he's just gone. No announcement, no reason. The guy who tracks these cases for a living called this the clearest cut of the bunch. Big, splashy press release on the way in. Nothing on the way out. Ever notice that? They only hold the ceremony in one direction. And Harvard again, because Harvard is the gift that keeps on giving. Claudine Gay, remember her? Their announcement. First black president in nearly 400 years. Again, read what they led with. Not a finding, not a book, a first. 6 months later, she's gone. Shortest presidency in the history of the place. And how did Harvard learn there was a problem? A New York Post reporter called them. Thousands of employees in that building, 2 entire departments whose profession is words. Nobody in Cambridge, Massachusetts noticed a thing until a tabloid picked up the phone. Their own panel found 9 of 25 allegations were of principal concern, language reproduced without quotation marks, without clear credit. Harvard's own website defines that as stealing. Says so in plain English. Says it counts whether you did it on purpose or by accident. Harvard's verdict on Harvard? A few instances of inadequate citation. And then the part that actually got me. They contacted the authors she'd copied and reported back that none of them objected. That's not a plagiarism investigation. That's a hostage video. You do not get out of a theft charge because the guy whose truck you took said he wasn't really using it that weekend. Academia did not need DEI to invent cowardice. They were artisanal cowards before DEI had a budget or a name. That's not my argument. My argument is that you took a machine that was already crushing people and bolted a second one on top of it. So let's count them up, shall we? Cambridge, Harvard twice, Wisconsin, Columbia, Michigan State's in there as well. 2 countries, 5 institutions, 6 of the most selective, best resource, most self-satisfied buildings in the English-speaking world, every one of them stuffed with people whose literal profession is checking whether things are true. Same announcement, same word at the front, same ending. And now the second count, the one I asked you to keep. Every single one of them held a ceremony on the way in. Press release, photo, quote from a president, historic, a milestone for the institution. And on the way out, nothing. A renamed office, a quiet reassignment, a resignation letter posted at 9 p.m., a guy who just isn't listed on the website anymore. They will announce the hiring of a symbol to the entire planet. They will not announce anything that happens to the person afterward. So that's the pattern. Now here's the part no one will touch, and it's the reason I told you at the top that I feel bad for the guy. Jason Arday had 2 jobs. One of them was written down. Professor of Sociology, University of Cambridge. Salary, department office students. The other one was never written down anywhere, and it was the real one. And the difference between those jobs is the whole thing. See, the first job is finite. There's an amount of work you can do to it. You can finish a paper, you can teach the class, hold the office hours, sit on the committee. At the end of the year, you have done the job and you can go home and have a beer and be a person for a couple weeks. Sure. The second job has no finish line. Because think about what a symbol actually is. That's the second job. A symbol is proof. Proof that an 800-year-old institution finally changed, and proof has to keep proving. A symbol who was remarkable 3 years ago and isn't remarkable this year has stopped doing that job. Nobody ever finishes being a symbol. There's no version of that where you're done. You don't get a Friday, and your work had much better match. That's the part that eats people. The symbol is automatically larger than life. That's the entire point of it. That's why they wanted one. So if you're the symbol, everything attached to you has to be larger than life too. Your research, your story, your childhood, your Tuesday. A normal accomplishment isn't just insufficient. A normal accomplishment is a failure. So you've got a gap between the job on the contract and the job in the press release, and every single thing that man invented lives in that gap. Now, I'm not asking you to take my word for any of this because you can watch it happen on a calendar. Here's his charity story. Follow the dates. 2010, he's 24. He runs the marathons. He tells a reporter he's raised more than 100,000 pounds. The Just Giving page from that year is still live, by the way. Anyone can pull it up. 6,285 pounds. All right, rounding up, young guy, big talk. I've done worse in a bar. Big deal. Then a decade of absolutely nothing. No claims, nothing to check. He's just a guy doing his work. Then he becomes somebody. April of 2021, TEDx biography, 4.5 million pounds for more than 80 charities. September of 2021, a talk, just over 5 million. 2024, honorary degree citation, Speakers Bureau, charity announcement, 5.5 million pounds. For the same fundraiser he ran in 2010. Money raised in 2010 doesn't appreciate. A Just Giving page is not an index fund. Nobody's charity total goes up while they sleep. And look at the shape of it. 10 years flat. Then it climbs every time somebody introduces him. That's not a man who lied once and got stuck with it. That's a number doing a job because he was hired as a symbol. And he didn't just inflate what he'd done. This is the detail that got me. He inflated what he'd wanted. Back in 2010, he said his goal as a young guy had been 100,000 pounds by 25, 250,000 by 50. Modest, human. A real number a real person would pick. Oh, but by the 2020s, the goal he'd supposedly set himself as a kid had become 1 million pounds by 40. He went back and rewrote his own childhood to be the right size for the room he was standing in. That's not a lie about a fact. That's a man discovering his origin story wasn't big enough for the job of being a symbol of diversity. And it was never just the money. Once the story is the job, everything in the story has to grow. He said he was in 7 Up, the documentary series that follows British kids through their lives. That series started filming in 1964. He was born in 1985. He's claiming to be in a documentary that started shooting 21 years before he existed. The BBC was asked about it, and he said he had nothing to do with their films. He then said he was a snooker or pool hustler, pulling so much money that his mother thought he was dealing drugs. Somebody went and pulled the database, listed in 1 amateur tournament and won 0 prize dollars. He said he flew to South America and West Africa to install water points. WaterAid, the actual charity, said they don't send volunteers abroad. They don't encourage it. They don't facilitate it. The charity contradicted him. He said a pig's head was delivered to his family's home and police went round the butchers investigating. The police and the butchers say that never happened. 30 marathons in 35 days, 600 miles in 6 days, nonverbal until 11, couldn't read or write until 18. And when I first read all that, I wasn't thinking about diversity policy at all. Immediately as I read that book, I was thinking of James Frey, or Fry. Anyone remember this? He writes a memoir about addiction like 20-some years ago. Oprah puts her in her book club, sells 1 million copies, and then it comes out that he made everything up. She brings him back on the show and takes him apart on live television. It's still one of the most uncomfortable things ever broadcast in this lifetime. And James Fry is fine. That was 20 years ago. He got dismantled on daytime TV in front of the entire country, and he still writes books, and he's alive today. Same crime, completely different ending, and I can't stop chewing on why. Hold it, I'm going to answer it, and the answer isn't one anyone's fighting about. Now, here's the thing about that list, and I want you to actually hear this one. Not one of those was hard to check. Not one. The BBC has a phone number. The Snooker database is free and it's online. WaterAid answers every email. Every single one of those took a reporter about 4 minutes. And for 3 years at Cambridge University, nobody spent the 4 minutes. And then he explains the whole thing himself, and I don't think he even knew he was doing it. When it all came apart, he told the Times he hadn't raised that money alone. He was part of a syndicate, about 100 people. But he said when he spoke at events and talked to the press, the coverage focused on him. America, that's it. That's the entire episode in one sentence out of his own mouth, poor guy. 100 people did a thing, the machine needed a face. And once you're the face, that number is yours whether you earned it or not, and next year it has to be bigger because you have to be bigger. He's not describing a lie there, he's describing a job. He wrote every word. He said it into the microphone for years. He took the honorary degrees, took the speaking fees, and sold a memoir. Nobody held the pen. He owns all of it, and I'm not handing him a single excuse. But I've watched this whole country spend 3 weeks screaming about why he did it, and not one person has asked the only question that changes anything. Why did it keep working? Because that's the thing. Every year the number went up, and every year somebody printed it. Somebody read it into a microphone before he walked out on a stage. Somebody put it in a citation and handed him a hood. Not one institution in a decade ever sent him a bill for making the story bigger. They sent applause every time, louder and louder. You want to know how a man ends up claiming he was in a documentary that started filming 21 years before he was born? He got there one applauded exaggeration at a time, and the applause never stopped long enough for anyone to check. So let me tell you why this one gets under my skin, because I've been in that room. Years ago, I built an app, on-demand beauty. Dead simple idea. Everybody's seen a celebrity get their hair and makeup team at the hotel before the thing. I wanted that for a woman in Toledo with a wedding on Saturday, 2 kids and no time to come to her. That was the business at the height of the on-demand market. Uber had just launched. We were dealing with scheduling, stylists, insurance, and background checks. And like anybody building something, I needed capital. And in that pile of applications, I found a category of grants I didn't know existed. Grants for LGBTQ people. And America, my first thought was not noble. No, my first thought was, awesome, free money. I'll say being gay to get free money. I qualify. I've always qualified. Never once occurred to me to go look for gay money. So I applied, and I made finalist. And it was real money, the kind that changes what a small company gets to attempt. I had the org chart built in my head on the drive home from the meeting. Then I saw the room. The room was a few companies and some public offices that had recently publicly been accused of being anti-gay. Now, whether they actually were, I have no idea, and it was never my business. I didn't care. Here's what was my business, though. Nobody in that room had opened my app. Not one of them. Nobody asked about driver supply. Nobody asked about how you background check a stylist walking into a stranger's hotel room, which is the single hardest problem in that entire business and the thing I thought about in the shower for 2 years every morning. They asked about me, my story, my journey, where I grew up, how I came out to my parents. They didn't need an entrepreneur. They needed a face, a photograph. So I walked with a company that needed capital. I walked away from it because there was no amount of money that was going to make me the face of somebody else's press cleanup project. No way. But I had the training and the wherewithal to read it. So I got to take the halo off because I've heard myself tell that story and it comes out sounding a lot better than it was. I did not walk out of there because I have superior character. No, if anything, I have below superior character. I had spent years in marketing. I had built the exact same thing they were building, a story with a person stapled to it. I'd sold it to clients. I'd expensed the furniture. So I walked into that room and I recognized the furniture. That's not my virtue. That's a coincidence in my resume, honestly. Take that one coincidence away and I take the check. Every single time. I'd have taken the money, said the quotable thing, smiled in the photograph, and never once thought anything unusual had happened. And here's the difference between me and Jason Arday, and it isn't character and it isn't strength. I got to see the terms ahead of time. I read the room. I saw who was in it. I could tell what they really wanted and what they hadn't bothered to do. See, I got handed the price tag before I signed anything. He got an offer letter as a sociology professor. He was not offered symbol of diversity for an institution. That's it. That's the whole difference. Nobody ever walked him into a room and showed him what he actually was being bought for. There's no meeting. There's no document. There's no letter that says, by the way, half your job is going to be existing as a symbol for our diversity. I got out because I got lucky. He found out in year 3 in public with his name already on the building. This is what DEI creates, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody it touches, it hurts. Now everybody wants Cambridge punished, and I want to show you something better than punishment. I want to show you what they actually did in order in their own words, because believe it or not, there's a woman at the center of this whose name almost nobody has said, and every single thing I've been telling you tonight is sitting in her email. Hilary Cremen, head of the Faculty of Education at the University of Cambridge. Here's Professor Cremen on camera in BBC film, welcoming him to the job. We are so lucky to have you. You are one of the best in the world in terms of the research that you do. She said that. The best in the world. Now, I've been hired before. I have hired a lot of people. No one has ever said that about a hire. You don't say that about a person. You say that about a purchase. That isn't a welcome. That's a coronation. Congratulations, we've just made you the face and the symbol of diversity for an 800-year-old institution. 2 months later, 2 academics, David Harris at Plymouth Margin and Martin Hammersley at the Open University, bring Professor Cremen evidence of plagiarism in one of his articles. 2 professors with documents directly to her office. She gave him her full support. And her reasoning is in the email, so let me walk you through the most remarkable paragraph in this entire story. She writes that she met with him, that he agreed to take the article down and re-upload it, take it down and put it back up. That's the remedy for plagiarism. That's not a correction. That's a file save as mechanism. And then she writes the part that tells you everything. This is the best. She says that in that meeting, he spoke movingly about his experiences of racism and about the conditions he was living in when he wrote it. 2 professors brought her evidence. Real evidence, black and white, and she answered them with a feeling. Not, let's have someone take a look. Not, let me get the journal on the phone. Not the thing any first-year graduate student would be marched out of the building for skipping. A feeling, and the file immediately closed. That's the tell. That's how you know. And she is not alone in that building. Administrators were told about plagiarism concerns in 2023, and made a decision I want you to hear clearly because it is beautiful. They decided not to look at anything he published before he got there. That's the policy. We'll examine his conduct starting the day he became our problem. Fellas, that's not an integrity process. That's an alibi with a start date. So a real reporter picks it up, Jack Grove. Times Higher Education spends 2025 putting together a 63-page investigation. 63 pages, documents, comparisons, the whole thing. And he does what a reporter is supposed to do. He calls Arday for comment. And he gets a letter from Carter Ruck, big law firm. That story sat in a drawer for 10 months. 63 pages of journalism stopped cold by one guy billing $400 an hour to type the word defamatory. And the whole time it sat there, the talks continued. The honors continued. The memoir got sold. But again, that's not the part that should keep you up at night. Because then a complaint got made about that reporter to the Metropolitan Police. And the police opened an investigation into the journalist for 4 months. 4 months. A reporter under police investigation for asking a professor to comment on his own footnotes. The commissioner of the Metropolitan Police has since admitted they dropped the ball and that the complaint should have been screened out early as not requiring investigation. You understand what happened there, right? Somebody showed up with the evidence, and the evidence got investigated instead. And then it broke anyway. So here comes Cambridge, the University of Cambridge, 800 years old, an institution that exists for one purpose, which is to check whether things are true. They didn't check the scholarship. They issued a statement calling it a vile campaign. They literally went to the press office before they went to the library. They are a library. That's the whole building. That's the whole product. There's no factory. A degree from that place is a piece of paper that says a serious institution looked closely at this person and found them to be real. We checked. That's the entire business. Then somebody handed them 63 pages. They issued a press release about tone. Give me a freaking break. And Cambridge wasn't even the worst of them. Simon & Schuster bought that memoir. He said the advance was $1.4 million. A rival publisher asked about that number, called it, and this is a quote, absolutely insane. For $1.4 million, I will Google the guy. I'll do it tonight. I'll spring for the Wi-Fi myself, put it in the budget, keep the change. And here's what actually happened, which is worse than not checking. They checked just enough to protect themselves. Reporting says financial details got scrubbed out of that memoir and false claims came out of his author bio. So somebody in that building did look. Somebody found problems. Somebody quietly took the worst bits out. Then they published it on schedule anyways. That's not an oversight. An oversight is when you didn't know. They knew enough to edit and not enough to stop, and the book went into American stores 6 days after he was found dead. They're trying to recoup their money. All of this news and media, many people are going to buy it. They're just trying to recoup their $1.4 million. Now watch what happens next, because this is the part I really want you to see. The story breaks wide. It's in every paper in 2 countries. And Cambridge, the same institution that would not look at his work in 2023, that called an investigation vile, that let a lawyer's letter do its thinking for 10 months. Cambridge opens a formal investigation into his qualifications. The same day he resigns. 3 years of not looking, and then the week they need a defendant, they discover due diligence. Oh, good. The suspect has taken the case. And now Cambridge is overhauling how it hires senior professors. Senior dons wrote a joint letter saying the appointment process went, and this is their phrase, very badly wrong. Gotta love those English. Think about that for 1 second. You do not rebuild your entire hiring process over one man's honesty. You rebuild it over your own. That review is a confession. They just filed it as reform. And this is the pattern. And once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. Harvard announced the first black president in 400 years and let her go in 6 months. Harvard hired a first ever diversity chief and praised her work when the allegations came in. And when it got uncomfortable, they didn't defend her and they didn't fire her. They renamed the office. Wisconsin removed a man from the job and made sure everyone knew it wasn't for the plagiarism. Cambridge called the man the best in the world and then opened a file on his credentials the day he walked out the door. The same institution that will not check on you the way in will not hesitate to cut you on the way out. And it looks like hypocrisy. It isn't. It's perfectly consistent, and here's why. They were never protecting him, not for 1 minute, not on the best day he had ever had there. They were protecting the decision to hire him. Very different. While he was useful, defending him defended them. The second he was radioactive, cutting him loose also defended them. Same instinct, same person, even same email address. Nothing about their behavior changed at all. He was collateral both times. They built the statue, and they brought the hammer. And it was the same guy on the same payroll, and he did not think of it as a contradiction for 1 second because the statue was never the point. Because he lied. And within about 6 hours, this country and that one had picked sides. And I want to read you what the people with microphones actually said, and I'm not paraphrasing. These are their words. Sadiq Khan, mayor of London, posts that Arday was the victim of a pernicious public shaming that other people in his position simply wouldn't have faced. Diane Abbott, member of parliament, a vicious media had driven him to his death. Wayman Bennett, Stand Up to Racism, which organized a vigil in Trafalgar Square. His death was the result of a racist witch hunt. Joe Grady, who runs Britain's University Workers Union, the level of harassment he suffered and the racism he was subjected to has been sickening. Daniel Kebede, National Education Union, a public and brutal takedown that unleashed a tirade of racism. And at that vigil, the placards, 249 articles in 22 days, unalived by a witch hunt. And Carol Cadwalder, Guardian journalist, serious reporter, broke real stories, wrote this week that the British media should be shamed. They need to be shamed, that she feels ashamed, and asked the rest of the press, don't you? Now, I want you to notice something, and once you notice it, you're going to be annoyed as I am. Read that again. 6 people, a mayor, an MP, 2 union bosses, an activist, and a national newspaper columnist. Every single one of them is pointing at a journalist. Not one of them mentioned the announcement that led with his skin color. Not one mentioned the head of faculty who called him the best in the world, and then answered a plagiarism file with a feeling. Not one mentioned the administrators who decided not to examine anything published before he arrived. Not one mentioned the publisher that scrubbed his bio and shipped the book anyway. Every institution that actually touched this man got a complete pass from the people claiming to defend him. Then there's this one, and this one I genuinely cannot get past, ladies and gentlemen. Simon Woolley, who called what happened to Arday a lynching. And Simon Woolley is the principal of Homerton College at Cambridge University. You can't make this stuff up, folks. A lynching. A Cambridge man blaming the newspapers for what Cambridge did. America. That is the defendant standing on the courthouse steps giving a press conference about the police. And I want to be fair to him because I think he means it. I don't think that's cynical. I think he genuinely can't see it. I think he can look directly at his own employer's role in this, and it does not register as the thing that happened because in the story he's carrying, universities are the good guys and the press is the problem, and information that doesn't fit that story doesn't get in. Which is exactly what I'm about to tell you is wrong with all of this. Because every voice you just heard says the media killed this man. Fine, let's do the media. I've got a bone to pick with them too, and it's not the one they're expecting. February 23rd, 2023, one day, 3 national outlets. The BBC, Lawrence Colley, Cambridge University's Jason Arday becomes youngest black professor. The Guardian, Sally Wheel, Jaden Arday to become youngest ever black professor at Cambridge. The Times of London, Charlie Parker, Jason Arday becomes Cambridge's University's youngest black professor. 3 papers, 3 headlines, the same words. None of them led with a finding. None of them led with his research. 3 of the most powerful newsrooms in Britain got that press release and simply retyped it. I told you at the top of this hour to go read the announcement. That's what it looks like when the whole country reads it out loud in unison. He was hired as a symbol for Cambridge's diversity, not a sociology professor. And when he couldn't manage the pressure, he made shit up. And here's the BBC's interview from that same stretch. And I want you to actually hear this sentence. They're describing a boy they've told you could not talk until he was almost 12. And the BBC writes, although he could not speak, the young Jason fervently questioned the world around him. And then they give you what he was wondering about in there. Homelessness, war, 11 years old, nonverbal, silently interrogating global conflict. And a journalist at the British Broadcasting Corporation typed that, read it back, and thought, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Nobody stopped. Nobody at any desk in that building went, hang on, how does he remember the specific questions he was asking during the years he couldn't ask questions? But here's what made me want to put my head through this desk. That Just Giving page was live right then in 2023, 6,285 pounds, sitting on the open internet, one search away while 3 national newspapers printed 5 million. Nobody spent the 4 minutes, not the BBC, not the Guardian, not the Times. Now, here's the part where I actually get mad and I don't find it funny. Fast forward to this month, stories everywhere. And the BBC files a piece about how his 2023 appointment was hailed at the time as a progressive moment. Was hailed. Hailed. Passive voice. Hailed by whom exactly? You! You hailed him. You're the hailer. Your byline is on the hailing. Lawrence Colley, February 23rd, 2023. Go look it up. It's still on your website. That is a newsroom writing about the weather when they are the weather. And I've seen this exact move before from our own press, and I'll see it again next month. You create the narrative, it collapses, and then you cover the collapse as though you found it lying in the road. Sorry, BBC. Doesn't work for me. And the number that finishes it all. The BBC runs a unit called, I can't say it with a straight face, BBC Verify. Its entire purpose is debunking disinformation. Roughly 60 journalists with a budget north of £3 million a year. 60 people, £3 million, one job. Is this true? While this story was breaking, BBC Verify was busy investigating whether an AI tool could generate misinformation, what heat waves have done to British landscape, and whether sunscreen causes cancer. They did the sunscreen. They did not happen to Google the professor their own newsroom crowned. And I want to give credit where it's earned because one of them finally did the job, my God. August 1st this year, Lane Bakari, or Lanre Bakare, at The Guardian publishes a real investigation, digs into the biography, and two of Arday's former primary school classmates tell him they remember Jason talking, joking, singing. One reporter, some phone calls, that's all it ever took. And that's The Guardian, not The Telegraph, not a right-wing outlet, not somebody with a stake in taking a black academic down. Their own side checked and it didn't hold. But look at the date, August 1st, 2026. 3 years and 5 months after Sally Wheel at the same newspaper typed the headline. So here's my actual charge against the media, and it's the opposite of the one they're being handed. You didn't hound Jason Arday. You built him. You were the delivery system. Cambridge wrote the press release and hired him as a symbol for their diversity. And the BBC and The Guardian and The Times mailed it to 40 million people. Every profile made the symbol bigger. Every bigger symbol needed a bigger story. Every bigger story got printed uncorrected and became the source for the next one. 249 articles in 22 days is not the crime. The crime is 4 minutes nobody spent in 2023. And now they're standing over it going, who could possibly have built this thing? You did, with a byline. So far, I've been reading you one-liners, and that's cheap. Anyone can knock over a tweet. Somebody wrote the serious version with numbers, and I'm going to give it to you the way he wrote it at full strength, because if I can't beat the strong version, I've got no business doing this for a living. Ibram X. Kendi, probably the most famous anti-racism writer in America, wrote a piece last week in The Emancipator titled, "The Media Lynched Jason Arday." And here's his case, and it's not nothing. He cites a British media watchdog that counted 249 articles in 2 days about Jason Arday. 249 in 3 weeks about one sociology professor. Then he does the thing I always want people to do, which he goes and gets a comparison. When the Epstein files came out showing ties to a former British ambassador to the United States, Kendi says the UK press mentioned that man 119 times over a comparable stretch. An ambassador in the Epstein files 119 times. And then he lands the punch, and this is the one that should make you sit up. In 2023, a white Cambridge professor named William O'Reilly was found guilty of plagiarism, not accused, found guilty by a university tribunal after a 2-year investigation. And Kendi says essentially one newspaper covered it seriously. So a black Cambridge professor accused gets 249 articles. A white Cambridge professor found guilty gets 1. And Kendi says that's racism. Not so fast. Here's my problem about this whole thing. He's right about the numbers, but he's got the wrong culprit. It's not racism, that's for sure. Because let me tell you the rest of the O'Reilly story, and it's the most useful thing in this entire episode. That tribunal found his plagiarism was the product of negligent acts, not deliberate ones. And he kept his job. He stayed at Cambridge. Articles came down, and he went back to work. Now, why was that possible for one man, impossible for the other? Oh, because he was white and he was black, right? No. It's because one of them was a person, and the other was hired as a symbol of diversity. Nobody ever put out a press release about William O'Reilly. Nobody announced him to the planet. Nobody put the word first or youngest or only in front of his name. He was a professor doing professor things in the anonymity that every ordinary employee on Earth gets to have. So when he got caught, it was a personnel matter, a tribunal, a finding, a slap, Tuesday. Jason Arday was never allowed to be a personnel matter because Cambridge told the world about him first. They led the announcement with his skin color. They put him in a BBC film. They called him the best in the world. They made him the proof that an 800-year-old institution had finally changed. And once you are the proof, you can't have a small scandal. A symbol's plagiarism is never about plagiarism. It's a referendum on the entire story the institution told about itself. That's why it's 249 articles. So when Kendi asks why one professor got 100 times the coverage of another, I'd tell him he's asking a good question pointed at the wrong building. It wasn't the press that made Jason Arday a bigger story than William O'Reilly. It was Cambridge. They wrote the document that made him a symbol. They sent it to every news desk in Britain, and a symbol's fall is always going to be a national story because a symbol was never a person to begin with. Kendi thinks the press did this to him. The press showed up 3 years late to a story the University of Cambridge wrote, printed, and mailed out themselves. And I want to say the last part carefully because it does matter. The protection William O'Reilly got, the anonymity, the tribunal, the second chance, the Tuesday, that is what Jason Arday should have had. Kendi's looking at the gap and saying the black professor was treated worse. I'm looking at the same gap and saying yes. And the thing that made it possible was the thing everybody's calling the help. They didn't give him O'Reilly's protection because they'd already spent him. You cannot be a symbol on the way in and get a personnel matter on the way out. Cambridge picked which one he was in March of 2023 in writing and mailed it to everyone. 249 articles is not the racism of the British press. It's the interest rate on a press release from 2023. So how does this keep happening? In 2 countries across a decade with everybody watching. DEI stopped being a policy and it became a doctrine. That's the real problem, folks. The intentions were never the problem. We should want to give people a leg up. I'll say that into any camera in this country. But here's the difference between a policy and a doctrine. A policy can fail. You run it, results come back, and if the results are bad, you change the method. That's what a policy is. It's an experiment with a budget. You see, a doctrine cannot fail. When the results come back bad on a doctrine, the results are what get reclassified. And you have watched it happen 5 different times tonight. 2 professors bring evidence, out comes a feeling. Harvard is handed its own published definition of plagiarism, out comes a few instances of inadequate citation. Harvard gets 40 allegations against its diversity chief. Out comes a new name for her office. 63 pages of journalism arrives. Out comes a vile campaign. A reporter asks a question. Out comes a police file on that reporter. Every single time real information went in on one side, and every single time what came out the other side was something that required nobody to change anything. That's not a policy failing, that's an immune system working. You can't audit a program whose built-in defense is that auditing it makes you a bigot. That's not an argument you can win. That's a hearsay charge with an HR department, and once that's in place, no result on earth can get inside the building. And then the results came in about as loud as the results ever come in. A man is dead. 41 years old. A university humiliated in every newspaper in the English-speaking world. A publisher with a 7-figure problem sitting in stores. Senior faculty writing letters saying the whole process went very badly wrong. And what did anybody do with any of that? My side said, proof that DEI kills people. The other side said, proof that racism kills people. Both of them were handed a dead professor, and neither of them got one single piece of new information about it. Everybody reached for the script they walked in with. Nobody in this entire circus, not one person with a microphone or a byline, said the only honest sentence available. That isn't what I expected. Let me go back and look at the DEI method. If a dead man doesn't count as a result, then nothing is ever going to count as a result. And at that point, you're not running a program anymore. You're keeping a faith. DEI is now religious doctrine, which is why even the worst results in the world can't change their mind. So what do you actually do with this? Because I'm not asking anyone to burn anything down. I'm not asking one person watching to stop caring about the thing they care about. Keep helping, please. Go find people everywhere. Turn over rocks nobody bothers with. Recruit in places that have never seen a recruiter. Be as aggressive about that as you want to be, and I'll be standing right next to you. Then measure them the same way you measure everybody else, with the same standard written down, published, used every time for everybody, including the ones you already like. And then the part that nobody does. Go back and look at whether it worked. Not whether it felt right. Not whether the announcement went well. Not whether the photo op was good. Whether it worked. Folks, DEI does not work. It hurts the hirer, the hiree, and everyone who touches the institution or the service it's around. And that brings me to the only real test I've got. And it's not a test for Cambridge, and it's not a test for Harvard. It's a test for you and for me. Because here is the difference between a citizen and a zealot, and it has nothing to do with what you believe. You can believe the exact same thing. You can want the exact same outcome. You can have voted the same way your whole life. The difference shows up in exactly one moment. The moment the results come back and they're not what you wanted. You see, the citizen adjusts. Not surrenders, not apologizes, not admits the other side was right about everything. Adjusts. Says, okay, I still want what I wanted, but this route is hurting more people than it's helping, so I'm going to find another route to the same place. Oh, but the zealot doubles down. Says the results are wrong. Says the messenger is compromised. Says it's working, it just needs more time, more funding, better training. Says the critics are the reason it's failing. Same belief, same good intentions. Two completely different animals. And here's the uncomfortable part, and I'm including myself. You do not find out which one you are on the easy days. You find out on the days the numbers come back wrong and something you have publicly defended. I've been on the wrong side of that. I have defended things past the point where I should have stopped because backing up in public is humiliating and everybody knows it. I get it. But backing up is not losing. Backing up is steering. Real citizens steer. We must stop confusing the method with the mission. If the method failed, just change the method. Don't abandon your mission. And don't ever let anyone tell you the method is above being measured. Because the second a method can't be measured, it isn't a method anymore. It's a belief you're not allowed to question. And we have a word for those, and it is not policy. And go read the press release. That's the one thing I'd actually ask you to do this week. That's the tell. Because I told you at the top, it's the only written record of the second job. And now you know what it costs the person named in it. When they lead with what somebody did, that person has one job. They can finish it. They get to go home at night. When they lead with first, youngest, or only, that person just got handed a second job. They are now a symbol. They will never see it in writing. No one will ever admit it exists. And they will never, ever be allowed to finish. Jason Arday spent 3 years trying to be big enough for a job nobody ever told him he had. A hand up or a leg up is a good thing. Hand it to them in daylight, where everybody can see it, so nobody spends the rest of their life being asked about it, including them. Real quick before I let you go, everything lives now at chadparkerlaw.com. Books, including the free Common Sense Conservative Manifesto, every editorial, the Daily News. Subscribe and share it. It's the only marketing that's ever worked for me. 252-CHAD-LAW, that's the phone number. Call or text. And America, that was common sense. God bless you, President Reagan. And as always, may God save America.